Okay, getting back to the Princess Bride, where we left off with Inigo waiting for the man in black. We just learned about Inigo's past. And so now, we're back to the present, as he's waiting on the cliff top. Inigo paced the cliff edge, fingers snapping. 50 feet below him now, the man in black still climbed. Inigo's impatience was beginning to bubble beyond control. He stared down at the slow progress. Find a crevice, jam in the hand. Find another crevice, jam in the other hand. 48 feet to go. Inigo slapped his sword handle, and his fingers snapping began to go faster. He examined the hooded climber, half hoping he would be six-fingered. But no, this one had the proper accompaniment of digits. 47 feet to go now. Now 46. "Hello there!" Inigo hollered when he could wait no more. The man in black glanced up and grunted. "I've been watching you." The man in black nodded. "Slow going," Inigo said. "Look, I don't mean to be rude," the man in black said finally, "but I'm rather busy just now, so try not to distract me." "I'm sorry," Inigo said. The man in black grunted again. "I don't suppose you could speed things up," Inigo said. "If you want to speed things up so much," the man in black said, clearly quite angry now, "you could lower a rope or tree branch or find some other helpful thing to do." "I could do that," Inigo agreed. "But I don't think you would accept my help, since I'm only waiting up here so that I can kill you." "That does put a damper on our relationship," the man in black said then. "I'm afraid you'll just have to wait." 43 feet left. 41. "I will give you my word as a Spaniard," Inigo said. "No good," the man in black replied. "I've known too many Spaniards." "I'm going crazy up here," Inigo said. "Anytime you want to change places, I'd be too happy to accept." 39 feet, and resting. The man in black just hung in space, feet dangling, the entire weight of his body supported by the strength of his hand jammed into the crevice. "Come along now," Inigo pleaded. "It's been a bit of a climb," the man in black explained, "and I'm weary. I'll be fine in a quarter hour or so." Another quarter hour? Inconceivable. "Look, we've got a piece of extra rope up here we didn't need when we made our original climb. I'll just drop it down to you, and you grab hold, and I'll pull, and..." "No good," the man in black repeated. "You might pull, but then again, you also might let go, which, since you're in a hurry to kill me, would certainly do the job quickly." "But you wouldn't have ever known I was going to kill you if I hadn't been the one to tell you. Doesn't that let you know I can be trusted?" "Frankly, and I hope you won't be insulted, no. There's no way you'll trust me. Nothing comes to mind." Suddenly, Inigo raised his right hand high. "I swear on the soul of Domingo Montoya, you will reach the top alive." The man in black was silent for a long time. Then he looked up. "I do not know this Domingo of yours, but something in your tone says I must believe you. Throw me the rope." Inigo quickly tied it around a rock, dropped it over. The man in black grabbed hold, hung suspended alone in space. Inigo pulled. In a moment, the man in black was beside him. "Thank you," the man in black said, and he sank down on a rock. Inigo sat alongside him. "We'll wait until you're ready," he said. The man in black breathed deeply. "Again, thank you. Why have you followed us?" "You carry baggage of much value." "We have no intention of selling," Inigo said. "That is your business. And yours." The man in black made no reply. Inigo stood and walked away, surveying the terrain over which they would battle. It was a splendid plateau, really, filled with trees for dodging around, and roots for tripping over, and small rocks for losing your balance on, and boulders for leaping off if you could climb on them fast enough, and bathing everything, the entire spot, moonlight. One could not ask for a more suitable testing ground for a duel, Inigo decided. It had everything, including the marvelous cliffs at one end, beyond which was a wonderful 1,000-foot drop, always something to bear in mind when one was planning tactics. It was perfect. The place was perfect. Provided the man in black could fence. Really fence. Inigo did then what he always did before a duel. He took the great sword from its scabbard and touched the side of the blade to his face 2 times. Once along one scar, once along the other. Then he examined the man in black. A fine sailor, yes. A mighty climber, no question. Courageous, without a doubt. But could he fence? Really fence? Please, Inigo thought. It has been so long since I have been tested. Let this man test me. Let him be a glorious swordsman. Let him be both quick and fast, smart and strong. Give him a matchless mind for tactics, a background of the equal of mine. Please, please, it's been so long. Let him be a master. I have my breath back now, the man in black said from the rock. Thank you for allowing me my rest. We'd best get on with it then, Inigo replied. The man in black stood. You seem a decent fellow, Inigo said. I hate to kill you. You seem a decent fellow, answered the man in black. I hate to die. But one of us must, Inigo said. Begin. And so saying, he took the 6-fingered sword and put it into his left hand. He had begun all of his duels left-handed lately. It was good practice for him, and although he was the only living wizard in the world with his regular hand, the right, still, he was more than worthy with his left. Perhaps 30 men alive were his equal when he used his left. Perhaps as many as 50, perhaps as few as 10. The man in black was also left-handed, and that warmed Inigo. It made things fairer. His weakness against the other man's strength. All to the good. They touched swords, and the man in black immediately began the Agrippa defense, which Inigo felt was sound, considering the rocky terrain, for the Agrippa kept the feet stationary at first, and made the chances of slipping minimal. Naturally, he countered with Capoferro, which surprised the man in black, but he defended well, quickly shifting out of Agrippa and taking the attack himself, using the principles of Thibaut. Inigo had to smile. No one had taken the attack against him in so long, and it was thrilling. He let the man in black advance, let him build up courage, retreating gracefully between some trees, letting his Bonetti defense keep him safe from harm. Then his legs flicked, and he was behind the nearest tree. The man in black had not expected it and was slow, reacting. Inigo flashed immediately out from the tree, attacking himself now, and the man in black retreated, stumbled, got his balance, continued moving away. Inigo was impressed with the quickness of the balance return. Most men the size of the man in black would have gone down, or, at the least, fallen to one hand. The man in black did neither. He simply quick-stepped, wrenched his body erect, continued fighting. They were moving parallel to the cliffs now, and the trees were behind them mostly. The man in black was slowly being forced toward a group of large boulders, for Inigo was anxious to see how well he moved when quarters were close, when you could not thrust or parry with total freedom. He continued to force, and then the boulders were surrounding them. Inigo suddenly threw his body against a nearby rock, rebounded off it with stunning force, lunging with incredible speed. First blood was his. He had pinked the man in black, grazed him only, along the left wrist. A scratch was all, but it was bleeding. Immediately the man in black hurried his retreat, getting his position away from the boulders, getting out into the open of the plateau. Inigo followed, not bothering to try to check the other man's flight. There would always be time for that later. Then the man in black launched his greatest assault. It came with no warning, and the speed and strength of it were terrifying. His blade flashed in the light again and again, and at first Inigo was only too delighted to retreat. He was not entirely familiar with the style of the attack. It was mostly McBone, but there were snatches of Capoferro thrown in, and he continued moving backward while he concentrated on the enemy, figuring the best way to stop the assault. The man in black kept advancing, and Inigo was aware that behind him now he was coming closer and closer to the edge of the cliffs, but that could not have concerned him less. The important thing was to outthink the enemy, find his weakness, let him have his moment of exaltation. Suddenly, as the cliffs came ever nearer, Inigo realized the fault in the attack that was flashing at him. A simple Tybalt maneuver would destroy it entirely, but he didn't want to give it away so soon. Let the other man have the triumph a moment longer. Life allowed so few. The cliffs were very close behind him now. Inigo continued to retreat. The man in black continued advancing. Then Inigo countered with a T-bolt, and the man in black blocked it. He blocked it! Inigo repeated the T-bolt move, and again it didn't work. He switched to Capoferro. He tried Bonetti. He went to Fabri. In desperation, he began a move used only twice by Saint. Nothing worked. The man in black kept attacking, and the cliffs were almost there. Inigo never panicked, never came close, but he decided some things very quickly, because there was no time for long consultations. And what he decided was that although the man in black was slow in reacting to moves behind trees, and not much good at all amidst boulders, when movement was restricted, yet out in the open, where there was space, he was a terror. A left-handed, black-masked terror. "You are most excellent," he said. His rear foot was at the cliff edge. He could retreat no more. "Thank you," the man in black replied. "I have worked very hard to become so." "You are better than I am," Inigo admitted. "So it seems. But if that is true, then why are you smiling?" "Because," Inigo answered, "I know something you don't know." "And what is that?" asked the man in black. "I am not left-handed," Inigo replied. And with those words, he all but threw the six-fingered sword into his right hand, and the tide of the battle turned. The man in black retreated before the slashing of the great sword. He tried to sidestep, tried to parry, tried to somehow escape the doom that was now inevitable. But there was no way. He could block 50 thrusts, the 51st flicked through, and now his left arm was bleeding. He could thwart 30 riposts, but not the 31st, and now his shoulder bled. The wounds were not yet grave, but they kept on coming as they dodged across the stones, and then the man in black found himself amidst the trees, and that was bad for him. So he all but fled before Inigo's onslaught, and then he was in the open again. But Inigo kept coming. Nothing could stop him. And then the man in black was back among the boulders, and that was even worse for him than the trees, and he shouted out in frustration and practically ran to where there was open space again. But there was no dealing with the wizard, and slowly, again, the deadly cliffs became a factor in the fight. Only now it was the man in black who was being forced to doom. He was brave, and he was strong, and the cuts did not make him beg for mercy, and he showed no fear behind his black mask. "You are amazing!" he cried as Inigo increased the already blinding speed of the blade. "Thank you! He has not come without effort!" The death moment was at hand now. Again and again Inigo thrust forward, and again the man in black managed to ward off the attacks, but each time it was harder, and the strength in Inigo's wrist was endless, and he only thrust the more fiercely, and soon the man in black grew weak. "You cannot tell it," he said then, "because I am wearing cape and a mask, but I am smiling now." "Why?" "Because I'm not left-handed either," said the man in black. And he too switched hands, and now the battle was finally joined, and Inigo began to retreat. "Who are you?" he screamed. "No one of import, another lover of the blade. I must know." "Get used to disappointment." They flashed along the open plateau now, and the blades were both invisible, but oh, the earth trembled, and oh, the skies shook, and Inigo was losing. He tried to make for the trees, but the man in black would have none of it. He tried retreating to the boulders, but that was denied him too. And in the open, unthinkable as it was, the man in black was superior. Not much, but in a multitude of tiny ways he was of a slightly higher quality. A hair quicker, a fraction stronger, a speck faster, not really much at all, but it was enough. They met in the center plateau for the final assault. Neither man conceded anything. The sound of metal clashing metal rose. A final burst of energy flew through Inigo's veins, and he made every attempt, tried every trick, used every hour of every day of his years of experience, but he was blocked by the man in black. He was shackled by the man in black. He was baffled, thwarted, muzzled, beaten by the man in black. A final flick, and the great six-fingered sword went flying from his hand. Inigo stood there, helpless. Then he dropped to his knees, bowed his head, closed his eyes. "Do it quickly," he said. "May my hands fall from my wrists before I kill an artist like yourself," said the man in black. "I would as soon destroy Da Vinci. However," and here he clubbed Inigo's head with the butt of his sword, "since I can't have you following me either, Please understand I hold you in the highest respect." He struck one more time, and the Spaniard fell unconscious. The man in black quickly tied Inigo's hands around a tree and left him there, for the moment, sleeping and helpless. Then he sheathed his sword, picked up the Sicilian's trail, and raced into the night. "He has beaten Inigo," the Turk said, not quite sure he wanted to believe it, but positive that the news was sad. He liked Inigo. Inigo was the only one who wouldn't laugh when Fezzik asked him to play rhymes. They were hurrying along a mountainous path on the way to the Gilda frontier. The path was narrow and strewn with rocks like cannonballs, so the Sicilian had a terrible time keeping up. Fezzik carried Buttercup lightly on his shoulders. She was still tied hand and foot. "I didn't hear you. Say it again," the Sicilian called out, so Fezzik waited for the hunchback to catch up to him. "See," Fezzik pointed down. Far down at the very bottom of the mountain path, the man in black could be seen running. "Inigo is beaten." "Inconceivable!" exploded the Sicilian. Fezzik never dared disagree with the hunchback. "I am so stupid," Fezzik nodded. "Inigo has not lost to the man in black. He has defeated him. And to prove it, he has put on the man in black's clothes and mask and hood and boots and gained 80 pounds. The Sicilian squinted down toward the running figure. "Fool!" he hurled at the Turk. "After all these years, can't you tell Inigo when you see him? That isn't Inigo." "I'll never learn," the Turk agreed. "If there's ever a question about anything, you can always count on me to get it wrong." "Inigo must have slipped or been tricked or otherwise unfairly beaten. That's the only conceivable explanation." Conceivable, believable, the giant thought. Only he didn't dare say it out loud. Not to the Sicilian. He might have whispered it to Inigo late at night, but that was before Inigo was dead. He also might have whispered, "Heavable, thievable, weavable," but that was as far as he got before the Sicilian started talking again, and that always meant he had to pay very strict attention. Nothing angered the hunchback as quickly as catching Fezzik thinking. Since he barely imagined someone like Fezzik capable of thought, he never asked what was on his mind, because he couldn't have cared less. If he had found out Fezzik was making rhymes, he would have laughed and then found new ways to make Fezzik suffer. "Untie her feet," the Sicilian commanded. Fezzik put the princess down and ripped the ropes apart that bound her legs. Then he rubbed her ankles so she could walk. The Sicilian grabbed her immediately and yanked her away. "Catch up with us quickly," the Sicilian said. "Instructions," Fezzik called out, almost panicked. He hated being left on his own like this. Finish him, the Sicilian was getting peeved. "Succeed, since Inigo has failed us." "But I can't fence. I don't know how to fence." "Your way!" The Sicilian could barely control himself now. "Oh, yes, good. My way. Thank you, Fizzini," Fezzik said to the hunchback. Then, summoning all of his courage. "I need a hint." "You're always saying how you understand force, how force belongs to you. Use it. I don't care how. Wait for him behind there." He pointed to a sharp bend in the mountain path. "And crush his head like an eggshell." He pointed to the cannonball-sized rocks. "I could do that, yes," Fezzik nodded. He was marvelous at throwing heavy things. "It just seems not very sportsmanlike, does it?" The Sicilian lost control. It was terrifying when he did. With most people, they scream and holler and jump around. With Vizzini, it was different. He got very, very quiet, and his voice sounded like it came from a dead throat, and his eyes turned to fire. "I tell you this, and I tell it once. Stop the man in black. Stop him for good and all. If you fail, there will be no excuse. I will find another giant." "Please don't desert me," Fezzik said. "Then do as you are told." He grabbed a hold of Buttercup again and hobbled up the mountain path and out of sight. Fezzik glanced down toward the figure racing up the path toward him, still a good distance away. Time enough to practice. Fezzik picked up a rock the size of a cannonball and aimed at a crack in the mountain 30 yards away. Swoosh! Dead center. He picked up a bigger rock and threw it at a shadow line twice as distant. Not quite swoosh. 2 inches to the right. Fezzik was reasonably satisfied. 2 inches off would still crush a head if you aimed for the center. He groped around, found a perfect rock for throwing. It just fit his hand. Then he moved to the sharp turn in the path, backed off into the deepest shadow. Unseen, silent, he waited patiently with his killing rock, counting the seconds until the man in black would die. All right. So I'm going to pause here just a minute and go back to the map, because it's been a while since we've seen it. I don't know if we even looked at this side of the map here, where they climbed up the rope of the Cliffs of Insanity there, and you can see the place where it says Duel, and the two swords sticking in the ground there. And then they raced along this mountain path to the ambush, where it says ambush. And then we have a little picnic, which we will get to. But the next section, just like Inigo had, Fezzik also has his backstory. So we need to learn about Fezzik. Turkish women are famous for the size of their babies. The only happy newborn ever to weigh over 24 pounds upon entrance was the product of a southern Turkish union. Turkish hospital records list a total of 11 children who weighed over 20 pounds at birth, at 95 more who weighed between 15 and 20. Now, all of these 106 cherubs did what babies usually do at birth. They lost 3 or 4 ounces, and it took them the better part of a week before they got it totally back. More accurately, 105 of them lost weight just after they were born. Not Fezzik. His first afternoon, he gained a pound. Since he weighed but 15, and since his mother gave birth 2 weeks early, the doctors weren't unduly concerned. "It's because you came 2 weeks too soon," they explained to Fezzik's mother. "That explains it." Actually, of course, it didn't explain anything, but whenever doctors are confused about something, which is really more frequently than any of us would do well to think about, they always snatch at something in the vicinity of the case and add, "That explains it." If Fezzik's mother had come late, they would have said, "Well, you came late, that explains it." Or, "Well, it was raining during delivery. This added weight is simply moisture, that explains it." A healthy baby doubles his birth weight in about 6 months and triples it in a year. When Fezzik was a year old, he weighed 85 pounds. He wasn't fat, understand. He looked like a perfectly normal, strong 85-pound kid. Not all that normal, actually. He was pretty hairy for a 1-year-old. By the time he reached kindergarten, he was ready to shave. He was the size of a normal man by this time, and all the other children made his life miserable. At first, naturally, they were scared to death. Even then, Fezzik looked fierce. But once they found out he was chicken, well, they weren't about to let an opportunity like that get away. "Bully, bully," they taunted Fezzik during morning yogurt break. "I'm not," Fezzik would say out loud. To himself, he would go, "Woolly, woolly." He would never dare to consider himself a poet because he wasn't anything like that. He just loved rhymes. Anything you said out loud, he rhymed it inside. Sometimes the rhymes made sense, sometimes they didn't. Fezzik never cared much about sense. All that ever mattered was the sound. "Coward." "Coward." "I'm not." "Then fight," one of them would say, and would swing all he had and hit Fezzik in the stomach, confident that all Fezzik would do was go, "Oof," and stand there, because he never hit back, no matter what you did to him. "Oof!" Another swing. Another. A good stiff punch to the kidneys, maybe. Maybe a kick in the knee. It would go on like that until Fezzik would burst into tears and run away. One day, at home, Fezzik's father called, "Come here." Fezzik as always obeyed. "Dry your tears," his mother said. 2 children had beaten him very badly just before. He did what he could to stop crying. "Fezzik, this can't go on," his mother said. "They must stop picking on you." "Kicking on you? I don't mind so much," Fezzik said. "Well, you should mind," said his father. He was a carpenter with big hands. "Come on outside. I am going to teach you how to fight." "Please, I don't want." "Obey your father." They trooped out to the backyard. "Make a fist," his father said. Fezzik did his best. His father looked at his mother, then at the heavens. "He can't even make a fist," his father said. "He's trying. He's only 6. Don't be so hard on him." Fezzik's father cared for his son greatly, and he tried to keep his voice soft so Fezzik wouldn't burst out crying, but it wasn't easy. Honey, Fezzik's father said, look, when you make a fist, you don't put your thumb inside your fingers. You keep your thumb outside your fingers, because if you keep your thumb inside your fingers and you hit somebody, what will happen is you'll break your thumb, and that isn't good. Because the whole object when you hit somebody is to hurt the other guy, not yourself. Blurt. I don't want to hurt anybody, Daddy. I don't want you to hurt anybody, Fezzik, but if you know how to take care of yourself, and they know you know, they won't bother you anymore. Father. I don't mind so much. Well, we do, said his mother. They shouldn't pick on you, Fezzik, just because you need a shave. Back to the fist, his father said. Have we learned now? Fezzik made a fist again, this time with the thumb outside. He's a natural learner, his mother said. She cared for him as greatly as his father did. Now hit me, Fezzik's father said. No, I don't want to do that. Hit your father, Fezzik. Maybe he doesn't know how to hit, Fezzik's father said. Maybe not, Fezzik's mother shook her head sadly. Watch, honey, Fezzik's father said. See, simple. You just make a fist like you already know, and then pull back your arm a little and aim for where you want to land and let go. Show your father what a natural learner you are, Fezzik's mother said. Make a punch. Hit him a good one. Fezzik made a punch toward his father's arm. Fezzik's father stared at the heavens again in frustration. He came close to your arm, Fezzik's mother said quickly, before her son's face could cloud. That was very good for a start, Fezzik. Tell him what a good start he made, she said to her husband. It was in the right general direction, Fezzik's father managed. If only I'd been standing 1 yard further west, it would have been perfect. I'm very tired, Fezzik said. When you learn so much so fast, you get so tired. I do anyway. Please may I be excused? Not yet, Fezzik's mother said. Honey, please hit me. Really hit me. Try. You're a smart boy. Hit me a good one, Fezzik's father begged. Tomorrow, Daddy, I promise. Tears began to form. Today's not going to work, Fezzik, his father exploded. It's not going to work on me. It's not going to work on your mother. You're going to do what I say. When I say it, you're going to hit me. And if it takes all night, we're going to stand right here. If it takes all week, we're going to stand right here. And if it's splat. This was before emergency wards, and that was too bad, at least for Fezzik's father, because there was no place to take him after Fezzik's punch landed, except to his own bed, where he remained with his eyes shut for a day and a half, except for when the milkman came to fix his broken jaw. This was not before doctors, but in Turkey they hadn't gotten around to claiming the bone business yet. Milkmen still were in charge of bones, the logic being that since milk was so good for bones, who would know more about broken bones than a milkman? When Fezzik's father was able to open his eyes as much as he wanted, they had a family talk, the three of them. You're very strong, Fezzik, his father said. Actually, that is not strictly true. What his father meant was, You're very strong, Fezzik. What came out was more like this. Ever since the milkman had wired his jaws together, all he could manage was the letter Z. But he had a very expressive face, and his wife understood him perfectly. He says you're very strong, Fezzik. I thought I was, Fezzik answered. Last year I hit a tree once when I was very mad. I knocked it down. It was a small tree, but still, I figured that had to mean something. He says he's giving up being a carpenter, Fezzik. Oh no, Fezzik said. You'll be all well soon, Daddy. The milkman practically promised me. He wants to give up being a carpenter, Fezzik. But what will he do? Fezzik's mother answered this one herself. She and her husband had been up half the night agreeing on the decision. He's going to be your manager, Fezzik. Fighting is a national sport of Turkey. We're all going to be rich and famous. But Mommy, Daddy, I don't like fighting. Fezzik's father reached out and gently patted his son's knee. He said. It's going to be wonderful, his mother translated. Fezzik only burst into tears. They had his first professional match in the village of Sandiki on a steamy hot Sunday. Fezzik's parents had a terrible time getting him into the ring. They were absolutely confident of victory because they had worked very hard. They had taught Fezzik for 3 solid years before they mutually agreed that he was ready. Fezzik's father handled tactics and ring strategy, while his mother was more in charge of diet and training. They had never been happier. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of this highlighted thing. I don't know why it's highlighted. Weird. Fezzik had never been more miserable. He was scared and frightened and terrified, all rolled into one. No matter how they reassured him, he refused to enter the arena because he knew something. Even though outside he looked 20, and his mustache was already coming along nicely, inside he was still this 9-year-old who liked rhyming things. "No," he said. I won't, and you can't make me." "After all we've slaved for these 3 years, his father said. His jaw was almost as good as new now. "It hurt me," Fezzik said. "Life is pain," his mother said. "Anybody that says different is selling something." "Please, I'm not ready. I forget the holds. I'm not graceful and I fall down a lot. It's true." It was. Their only real fear was, were they rushing him? "When the going gets tough, the tough get going," Fezzik's mother said. "Get going, Fezzik," his father said. Fezzik stood his ground. "Listen, we're not going to threaten you," Fezzik's parents said, more or less together. "We all care for each other too much to pull any of that stuff. If you don't want to fight, nobody's going to force you. We'll just leave you alone forever." Fezzik's picture of hell was being alone forever. He had told them that when he was 5. They marched into the arena then to face the champion of Sandiki, who had been champion for 11 years since he was 24. He was very graceful and wide and stood 6 feet in height, only half a foot less than Fezzik. Fezzik didn't stand a chance. He was too clumsy. He kept falling down or getting his holds on backwards so they weren't holds at all. The champion of Sandiki toyed with him. Fezzik kept getting thrown down or falling down or tumbling down or stumbling down. He always got up and tried again, but the champion of Sandiki was much too fast for him, and too clever, and much too experienced. The crowd laughed and ate baklava and enjoyed the whole spectacle, until Fezzik got his arms around the champion of Sandiki. The crowd grew very quiet then. Fezzik lifted him up. No noise. Fezzik squeezed and squeezed. "That's enough now," Fezzik's father said. Fezzik laid the other man down. "Thank you," he said. "You're a wonderful fighter, and I was lucky." The ex-champion of Sandiki kind of grunted. "Raise your hands, you're the winner," his mother reminded. Fezzik stood there in the middle of the ring with his hands raised. "Boo!" said the crowd. "Animal! Ape! Gorilla! Boo!" They did not linger long in Sandiki. As a matter of fact, it wasn't very safe from then on to linger long anywhere. They fought the champion of Ispir. Boo! The champion of Simal. Boo! They fought in Balu. They fought in Zile. Boo! "I don't care what anybody says," Fezzik's mother told him one winter afternoon. "You're my son, and you're wonderful." It was gray and dark, and they were hot-footing it out of Constantinople just as fast as they could, because Fezzik had just demolished their champion before most of the crowd was even seated. "I'm not wonderful," Fezzik said. "They're right to insult me. I'm too big. Whenever I fight, it looks like I'm picking on somebody." "Maybe," Fezzik's father began a little hesitantly. "Maybe, Fezzik, if you just possibly kind of sort of lose a few fights, they might not yell at us so much." The wife whirled on the husband. "The boy's 11 already. You want him to throw fights?" "Nothing like that. No, don't get all excited. But maybe if he'd even look like he was suffering a little, they'd let up on us." "I'm suffering," Fezzik said. He was. "Let it show a little more." "I'll try, Daddy." "That's a good boy." "I can't help being strong. It's not my fault. I don't even exercise." "I think it's time to head for Greece," Fezzik's father said then. "We've been beating everyone in Turkey who will fight us, and athletics began in Greece. No one appreciates towns like the Greeks." "I just hate it when they go boo," Fezzik said. He did. Now his private picture of hell was being left alone with everybody going boo at him forever. "They'll love you in Greece," Fezzik's mother said. They fought in Greece. Arg! Arg was Greek for boo. Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Romania, boo! They tried the Orient, the Jiu-Jitsu champion of Korea, the karate champion of Siam, the kung fu champion of all India. See note on Arg. In Mongolia, his parents died. "We've done everything we can for you, Fezzik. Good luck," they said, and they were gone. It was a terrible thing, a plague that swept everything before it. Fezzik would have died too, only naturally he never got sick. Alone, he continued on across the Gobi Desert, hitching rides, sometimes with passing caravans, and it was there that he learned how to make them stop booing. Fight groups. It all began in a caravan on the Gobi when the caravan head said, "I'll bet my camel drivers can take you." There were only 3 of them, so Fezzik said. Fine, he'd try, and he did, and he won, naturally. And everybody seemed happy. Fezzik was thrilled. He never fought just one person again if it was possible. For a while he traveled from place to place, battling gangs for local charities, but his business head was never much, and besides, doing things alone was even less appealing to him now that he was into his late teens than it had been before. He joined a traveling circus. All the other performers grumbled at him because, they said, he was eating more than his share of the food, so he stayed pretty much to himself, except when it came to his work. But then, one night, when Fezzik had just turned 20, he got the shock of his life. The booing was back again. He could not believe it. He had just squeezed 6 men into submission, cracked the heads of 6 more. What did they want from him? The truth was simply this. He had gotten too strong. He would never measure himself, but everybody whispered he must be over 7 feet tall, and he would never step on a scale, but people claimed he weighed 400. And not only that, he was quick now. All the years of experience had made him almost inhuman. He knew all the tricks, could counter all the holds. Animal! Ape! Gorilla! Boo! That night, alone in his tent, Fezzik wept. He was a freak. Speak. He still loved rhymes. A 2-eyed cyclops, eye drops, like the tears that were dropping now, dropping from his half-closed eyes. By the next morning, he had gotten control of himself. At least, he still had his circus friends around him. That week, the circus fired him. The crowds were booing them now, too, and the fat lady threatened to walk out, and the midgets were fuming that it was for Fezzik. This was in the middle of Greenland, and as everybody knows, Greenland then, as now, was the loneliest place on Earth. In Greenland, there is 1 person for every 20 square miles of real estate. Probably the circus was pretty stupid taking a booking there, but that wasn't the point. The point was that Fezzik was alone, in the loneliest place in the world, just sitting there on a rock, watching the circus pull away. He was still sitting there the next day when Vizzini the Sicilian found him. Vizzini flattered him, promised to keep the booze away. Vizzini needed Fezzik, but not half as much as Fezzik needed Vizzini. As long as Vizzini was around, you couldn't be alone. Whatever Vizzini said, Fezzik did, and if that meant crushing the head of the man in black, so be it.